Welcome to the Jack and Jake Talk. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jake.
All right, last time we talked about CAR T cell therapy. Jake, what's our topic for today?
Today we're talking about doppelgangers. And I honestly know very little other than it's not a twin. It's not a twin of you. Like an
That's
a relative, right? Someone who's related to you. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess the formal definition is a lookalike that isn't related to the subject person. So maybe they have very similar facial features or voice or all of the above, but they have no blood relation. And it's just kind of a funny quirk of the world where you happen upon somebody and they seem to be your double.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. I mean, kind of going into in the broader sense of it, or a little bit more, is that when it comes to movies and films, when they have the actors, they also have stunt doubles that look close to the actor, but not quite. But there's some out there where some people look exactly like the actors. And I know some of those stunt people, like I know The Rock, he has a stunt double who, man, pretty close to what The Rock looks like, but they're not at all related.
Yeah, that would be kind of interesting actually to watch a movie with a lot of stunt doubles, and for every single scene where that actor or that double is in the scene, you have like maybe a little icon in the corner, and it says Denzel Washington is on the screen. And then whenever it's the stunt double, it switches and it says, the stunt double's name. And it'd be interesting if you could tell, or if it's not so obvious sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I mean, most of it's for the action sequences where there's that possibility of someone getting injured and all, but then there's also plenty of actors out there like, I don't have a stunt double because I could care less about getting injured, which I don't know if the production companies would think that, but it's kind of weird though too. Especially if you're outside of the usual place that you're around, like say if you live in a certain state, and then you go to another spot and you see someone who looks like someone that you know, but it's not that person.
Has that ever happened to you?
Far too often.
Really?
Doing a double take and going like, that looks like so and so. And then you try to be
so not just
inconspicuous,
yourself,
right?
but people you're saying.
I have a buddy, Matt, real tall guy with blonde hair. And there's been a couple times where I'm like, is that Matt? And then, you try to do that inconspicuous thing of being like, okay, I'm going to try to just like poke or see like if that's that person. Because you obviously want to talk to them because if you know them. And then it's almost like a heartbreak when you realize that, oh, that's not that person.
Now, with these cases with your friend Matt, is it something where he has some facial features? He has like some generic features that many people have, or is it something where he stands out so much? If you see anybody who looks remotely like him, you're gonna notice it.
I don't know. Probably just some certain features, especially walking. Walking's one thing with people if you're able to see how their movements. I feel like is another big thing too, where some people walk or where their shoulder movements are or where their feet move. Right, it looks like it's a certain individual. Where if we look at like the body movements of people as well, right? We all some people move a certain way, right? Yeah.
That's
The other thing
interesting.
is,
So not just their appearance, but their behavior, their movements.
yeah. And I mean, if you look in the larger context as well as us as a human species, right? Genetically, there's tons of variety of people, right? I guess you could say diversity, but just different peoples. And but how spread out can that get, right? You're gonna have duplications that are gonna look similar enough for certain people.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned your friend's way of moving about because actually the word doppelganger, it comes from German, and it literally translates to double walker.
Double walker.
Yep,
Huh. I did not know that.
now you do.
Now it's known. Now it's known. Jack, have you ever had that situation where you're like, that looks like someone I know?
I can't say I've ever had that happen. I've had it happen once, just once. I've never seen somebody who looks like me. Um, maybe a couple similar features. I mean, I have a cousin with some very similar features that I've never had in common with anybody else. But again, he's a blood relative, so it doesn't really count.
Right.
Um, I did see one person once on the subway, um, and she was the spitting image of a college friend I had. Um, and I was like, this is not, it's clearly not her because I was in Boston at the time. She was living in Washington State. And to my knowledge, she didn't have any sisters or cousins around her age either. Um, so it was very weird. And it was the same kind of thing that you said with your friend, where, it wasn't just the appearance, but it was kind of like the mannerisms of, just, sitting there on the subway and then, walking away. I was like, too similar. It kind of creepy. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, because I mean, I think it's really kind of odd when you realize that it's not that person, right?
Yeah, that's when it gets weirder. When you
Yeah,
confirm for yourself it's not who I think it is, and then your question comes to, well, why do they look so similar?
yeah, and that's even to the point I was bringing about, our genetic code as well, right? I mean, there is that I know of not an infinity of genetic code wise. There is a number where it's finite to a certain amount, so you're gonna have additional, people who are gonna look the same. But another part I want to bring up is also voices. The way that people talk is another thing too, where
Yeah,
you've heard someone talk. I know this is not really following the doppelganger, but it's also the point of when you hear someone talking and go, wait a minute, that sounds like so and so. And then it's a complete different person. Or even the way our vocal cords work, right? There's a finite way that all our vocal cords would develop, but they can sound similar.
hmm.
And just think you've got plenty of people who are impressionists who copied the voices of other people. So,
It makes you wonder how many recordings there are out there of well-known people, and it's just an audio recording. And it makes you wonder how many of those are genuine because it's not that hard for a ventriloquist or a voice acting professional to duplicate a voice.
hmm hmm
Much harder to duplicate somebody's face.
man, I hate to say there's AI.
Yeah, we
That's the
could go down
thing.
that rabbit hole too. Yeah.
Yeah, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but that is a way that if someone really, really wanted to duplicate, they could do that. Um, yeah,
I
because then
do.
yeah,
I was going to say I have a couple interesting cases of
okay,
doppelgangers if you want to take a look here.
yeah,
Let me share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. So this is a case back in 1999, and there was a robbery in a Walmart parking lot. And there were one or two witnesses, as well as the victim, of course, who identified the suspect by, his facial features,
Mhm.
his hairstyle. I think even there was something to do with his identity too. I think it had to do with his name. So the name of the actual perpetrator, and the name of the suspect, they shared the same first name. Um, and so the man on the right there is Ricky Jones. So he was
Yeah.
sentenced for this crime. The man on the left is Ricky Amos, and he was the actual perpetrator. And they found this out years later, and the guy who served the time originally was fully exonerated, and the other guy who was the true criminal, I think, went to jail, after the fact. But it's just very, it's very interesting. Okay, these men look very similar. They share the same first name, and they happen to live in the same area. So that's how, you know, the the wrong suspect was nabbed for this. Um, Kind of crazy.
Terrible. I can imagine the guy, the rookie that was in there and wasn't supposed to be for all that time, right?
No, yeah, and it makes you. I mean, it's one of those things where it's just it's a common occurrence that people have in their daily life. I see somebody who's a lookalike, but it makes you think deeply about the psychology and also the real world, uh, ramifications of that kind of situation. In this case, the justice system. You think, okay, the famous line, better to have, uh, 10 criminals go free than one innocent man be imprisoned. Very interesting. That's more real world. There's
Yeah.
many scenarios with the doppelgangers too. It's more rooted in, literature and
Mhm.
mythology and kind of folk tale as well. Lots of stories of apparitions.
Mhm.
There's another similar term. So doppelganger, you have the double walker. It could be a literal person. You share the same traits. Many times it's seen as like an apparition, like it's a projection of somebody, almost like a spirit or a ghost, and they happen to, be seen by somebody else. Um, there's a few well-known cases. One was, Abraham Lincoln. There's a story where he was lying on the couch, and this was before his second term, and there was a mirror, in this living room on the near the couch he was laying on, and he looked over at the mirror and he saw his image, but he kind of saw like a weird double image of his face. And it wasn't, it was one of those things where, the details of the story are unclear, like something about the way he was laying on the couch, whereas the figure in the mirror was standing up or wasn't exactly mirroring him. And he was also paler and in worse shape, um, than his true self. And
Hmm.
he was kind of shocked. He got up, the figure disappeared, and he looked in the mirror again. It was just his mirror image. And he ended up seeing that vision or apparition in the mirror, I think at least one other time. And his wife took it really poorly, as his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. I guess she
Mhm.
saw that as a bad omen. I think she was very superstitious in general, but she took that as a bad omen, like this second term, that, he's going to win the second term and it's not going to be good for his
Mhm.
health. And as you know, he passed away before his second term was over. He was assassinated. Um, so there's many stories like that of a bad omen, or some kind of precognition or some warning that something bad is going to happen. That's something you see very often with the doppelganger.
Mm-hmm. I wonder also psychologically as well with that, where maybe it was one of those days, and I'm just going to the story itself of Lincoln, where maybe he was at some point that week or that day considering his future, and then mentally, your brain can kind of make you think things, right? And I know as well, this kind of goes back and not so much doppelgangers, but when you dream and you see certain people, and maybe sometimes you remember that person, but maybe not. Our brains do remember a fair amount, it's just not always clarity, right? So when you see someone, you're like in a dream or something, you're like, wait a minute, I've seen this person before. You may have actually seen them in passing at some point in time, and your brain, for some reason, decided to store that, even though you may have no idea who this person is. And that's also like maybe to the part that you're going at with the apparition or memory, is that maybe someone that you think you're seeing is someone that your brain has stored, and it's just having a fun time filling in the pieces to make it really go like, wait a minute, I know that person. It's like, no, you don't know that person.
It's possible, yeah. I mean, there's some studies done with examples or specific cases where somebody has kind of like a dislocation, and that, where their view or vision or their sense of themselves kind of dislocates from their body. Like normally when you think, where am I, or where is, my consciousness or my soul or my mind, people tend, if you ask them that question, they tend to say, okay, I'm in here in my head, or I'm here in my heart, or some people say I'm in my gut. That's their center. But there's many examples where, people have a moment where they feel dislocated, like they feel above their body, or they have, I forget the exact term, like a spectral kind of projection where they have it's almost like a dream state, and you leave your body and you go travel. Um, but there's a few medical explanations. One can be a mental disorder of some kind. There's examples of schizophrenia or other where people have a hallucination, and they seem to think they can see themselves off at a distance or close by, but outside their body, they're looking at themselves. Um, and then there's also examples of experiments with electromagnetism where you can take, literal magnets or electromagnets, some kind of tool that makes a magnetic field, and if you put your head, literally your brain, in a magnetic field and you alter that magnetic field, it can change your sensory perception of your vision and your physical uh, sense of touch and place and feeling. So and it mostly emanates as like a feeling of I'm floating above my body. So that could explain, in some sense, that sense of the doppelganger, where you seem to see yourself, or you see an apparition, more less of the I saw somebody who looks like me in the cafe, and more of a
Right.
like I saw myself at the other side of the room, and it really freaked me out. But there are a few explanations that seem reasonable. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And
Huh.
then there's some that don't seem reasonable.
Yeah. It's very much, it seems like it depends on situation wise and stuff like that, right? Where there could be a bunch of truth to it, where it's like, hey, you actually did someone uh, just like yourself or someone else. In other moments, it could just be your thoughts wandering a little bit. But I feel like that also happens when people are bored or they really have something weighing on their mind where you're not focused as much on certain pieces.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I wanted to highlight this one too. This is a very famous case of a doppelganger. And this woman's name was Emily Segui. I believe she was a French school teacher. And at the time, she was in modern day Latvia teaching young students. And there were cases where she would leave the classroom and then an apparition would appear in her chair. Um, and she was very clearly not the apparition because like the students would look out the window and she'd be like tending to the school's garden, but then they'd look back inside the classroom and there she is sitting at the chair. And sometimes this doppelganger would even start like resume the lesson, and they're like, but she's over there, but she's in here. And there are multiple cases and multiple witnesses, and they've never been able to pin down what was going on there, if it was a mass hysteria or if it was something else. No clue.
Strange things can happen, right? It just turns out a prank that they were all trying to pull.
Maybe. I mean,
everyone was in on it.
school children, you never know. You never know what the plan is to get out of class.
Right. But they probably, if that was the truth, they went very far out of their way to do it.
Yeah, that's a pretty in-depth prank to try to pull.
Right. But that's not to say, and I've heard kids say some wild things. You're like, where did that come from? Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting, right? The fact that even if you were to tell someone, hey, there is a likelihood that there is someone who looks exactly like you, talks like you, but has had completely different life than you have in the world, right?
It's a weird thought to think that there could be somebody who's nearly identical to you and they're doing something totally different. Or they could be right next door and have a very similar life.
That too. But the one that kind of make you think where if you could actually meet that person, have a conversation, and what if you found out they were doing better than you? And you're like, wait a minute. Am I just lazy? Or or the flip flop where you find out they're not doing well and you go like, pick it up.
Well, that wouldn't be too bad. I mean, usually when you hear stories of doppelgangers, it's something nefarious, like a bad spirit or like an evil twin or some sort of negative, reverse image of yourself, kind of more paranormal. So I'll take the casual doppelganger who just, he works in finance instead of in science or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I guess I just interpreted it's interesting genetics in people and the fact that even if you did see someone who looks like someone you know or like yourself, it's intriguing. It's very intriguing.
I wonder also how much it has to do with just name designation. Like, for example, I know we've mentioned before. There's in different countries there's rules on what you can name your child. For example, in Iceland, I think the list is only 300 names long, roughly, for each sex. So you get 300 male names and 300 female names to choose from, and that's it. So there's only so many Helgas and Olaf, so I wonder almost too if there's a lot of Olafs in your town, you might start to think of them as similar.
Yeah. No, that's not the Olaf from the house on 3rd Street. That's the one from 4th Street.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, no, it's the second house down from 4th Street because there's more than one that that type of thing. That'd be interesting though, for naming people and all. Yeah. Well, I didn't have much else talking about this one, Jack. I had a lot of interesting things about people or such that look like someone or look like you to be a doppelganger.
Yeah, I think that about does it, Jake.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening in. We hope we see you next time. And Jack, what are we talking about our next episode?
All right, next week, Jake, our topic is Jupiter, the planet Jupiter.
Cool. All right. See y'all then.